KCDF podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy. This is Series 1 of Conversations with Women in African Philanthropy, a KCDF program known as Adɔyɛ. The series was recorded at the sidelines of a retreat that took place at the Wits Rural Facility in Limpopo in January 2025, hosted by KCDF's Adɔyɛ program and Nawi AfriFem Collective. Adɔyɛ is dedicated to celebrating and amplifying the contributions of African women in philanthropy while creating spaces for dialogue, learning, and collaboration. Adɔyɛ operates under the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment, aligning its mission with broader goals of promoting effective philanthropic practices in Africa. Through its efforts, Adɔyɛ seeks to build knowledge, foster dialogue, cultivate partnerships, and advocate for policies that support women in philanthropy.
All right. Welcome to another episode of our Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Moyo. I'm really excited this afternoon to be joined by Janet Mawiyoo. Janet, is not the first time that we're speaking to you on this podcast, so welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for making the time. We are meeting here in Mpumalanga at the Wits Rural Facility. This is Limpopo, actually. Yeah, we are meeting in Limpopo at the Wits Rural Facility, where you are joining a crop of other women from across the board, even geographies, different experiences, age groups, but all with the intention of putting together some of your thoughts and maybe some of your experiences into writing. I just want to find out, it's almost probably a week now into it, or what the experience has been like, any reflections so far on what has worked and what hasn't worked.
It's actually, thank you, Becky, for having me again. It's actually been a very interesting experience. I wish I had had it earlier, although maybe this is the right time.
Yeah.
Because I have had time since stepping out of my full-time engagement with KCDF for now 3.5 years. And so I've had time to look back, to kind of chill, maybe I may use that word, and kind of reflect on what that experience was, what it has meant. And I continue to observe. I have tried not to keep too far from a lot of organizations that were in the philanthropic sector. Yeah. So it's been a great time, and now being here and having the opportunity to write, I think that has really been something. Yeah. I'm really hoping that finally I can get to write my book, which I hope will share some of the experiences of many years, not just my time at KCDF, but the whole area of the philanthropic sector, and basically working in the non-profit side, observing the things we try to do. Maybe also I've had time to reflect on maybe why it is hard to do some things, and perhaps things that we need to do differently. So I think my time of writing is proving to be interesting. I did struggle to get going, and I feel like I have been jump-started. So I'm really excited, and I'm hoping I can spend the next few months working on a book which I hope will help other non-profit leaders, because that's really why I'm writing.
And of course, as somebody who came in, you've always wanted to do this. I know I've been a pain. Every time I meet you, I'm like, when are we doing this? When are we doing that? Even to a point of saying, when are you doing a PhD and all of that? And then you are here, but this is just a few days. So it might initiate something, but to propel it and sustain it, what kind of support or what kind of mechanism do you think we should put in place for people like yourself and others, so that you don't come here, get excited, you leave, and then nothing happens?
That is something that is still in my head. And actually that's why I was hoping by the time I leave here I would have 2 or 3 chapters or some draft of sorts of some of the things that I want to write about. And it's been very useful to have accountability partners. We sort of meet at certain times and with 2 or 3 people go over the stuff. So I think the need for having other people to bounce back ideas is an important one.
Yeah.
Our facilitators have been excellent. You share a chapter and in a day you get some feedback. So I think the ability to be able to have some people who understand where you are going to go and who challenge you. I think those of us who are used to writing official documents in the sense of, proposals, writing for funders. Yeah. So you sort of perfect the art of writing for that kind of constituency. But we've been challenged about just writing, just being yourself.
Yeah.
And trying to not make Janet a very different person from the Janet who was working. That Janet is a very ordinary person.
Yeah.
So how do you bring out all those things, how they affect you as Janet? What does that mean? Because this is the thing that other people are going through. And sometimes you don't have a life. And so I feel there's need for a support mechanism to help us to keep on the journey. I feel for me it is really important. I wish like a few other things I could do it in a year. I don't know whether that's possible. And of course it's conflicting with the stuff I do every day. I consult. I still have to pay for my lights, etc. Yeah. So in the process, I think that becomes a competition. Because your daily needs have to be met, and you also want to write.
Yeah.
And also the opportunity to go away. I think that has really been a privilege, I recognize. So I think every so often, if there's a mechanism to step away and just move away from all the things, I've been able to say no to the things I do every day so that I can focus. I think that focus seems to be paying dividends. Yeah. So I think it's finding all these very practical ways of supporting the writers. And of course, while I've been here, I've really thought about many other people who have experience they could write, and I wish they too could have had that opportunity. So it's also finding a mechanism for us, especially as Africans, to bring these experiences such that they can help other organizations, other leaders. That's, for me, is a very big need that we have.
Yeah. And in many ways it will speak to even our identity as institutions that work on philanthropy.
Exactly.
How do you make sure that what you have you also share and give to others? So that's something that we will need to really think about. Are we in a position to get snippets of what you are writing and working on? What are some of the themes that you are focusing on?
Actually, it's been very interesting to reflect back on my life those days. And there's a sense in which I'm almost carrying myself to another life, and kind of realizing how it was and how it brought me to that. So looking at it retrospectively, I mean, just the issues around how this has an impact on you as a leader. The leadership we have is so demanding that it actually does hit us hard. And yet you're a normal person with a family, and sometimes it's like you live like you have one life, the work life. That's a very serious challenge for leaders. So I'm hoping I can, in interesting, honest ways, kind of bring out those kind of conflicts through the journey, and of course, there's the baggage that we as organizations have, which very often we are not conscious about. What our organizations represent when we are working with communities, and just trying to create more consciousness of the need for us as leaders of organizations to be a bit more alert and aware about how this affects, especially local communities. The impact that has, either in making them recognize their issues, what they need to do, and what they need to do differently. So being aware of the baggage we bring because of the institutions that we carry is also an area I'm hoping I can write about the limitations of our structures and how we need to find ways of opening up so that we can be more receptive, open, and be more supportive in a better, empowering way. I think there are very many dynamics that I'm hoping as I go through in a sense, it kind of shows the kind of journey I went through, having spent some time in government, spent some time working in a bilateral, and then eventually going to work with an INGO, learning a lot, getting completely grounded, but still being limited. And so the issues around decolonizing development are things that are very much on my loop. But more important for me is the independence we need when we have our own resources. So for me, the issue of resources is very much going to feature significantly, because it is that which allows you to either say yes or say no to, you know, what you should be doing, how you should be working, even the area you are working in. So I feel African institutions need to really work hard to address their own dignity, their own sovereignty, their own ability to make decisions and do the right thing. So knowing the right thing is not enough. You need to have the ability to do that, and resources are at the center of that. So I'm hoping I can make it a very sort of easy to read way of talking about my work, so that everybody picks what they find relevant for where they are.
And of course, you just said something that is powerful to me, for me, that is, maybe this is the right time for you to write. And I'm wondering whether, if you tried writing at the time when you were at the helm of any of the institutions, whether you would have had the freedom and maybe even the flexibility and the power to deal with some of the themes that might emerge, or it's actually much better to do it now because you've had the benefit of letting it cool and then reflecting backwards.
Certainly, having had time to let it cool, let me internalize everything and be able to stand back and see actually what was that journey about? What was that, you know? Wasn't that crazy? And of course, I keep meeting people and I can tell they are completely taken up by what they are doing. They don't even exist. Even when I look at their eyes, I sometimes feel sorry. I mean, I'm like, oh my God.
But you were once that.
I was, unfortunately, I was once that. And so I am continuing to ask myself, how can we be more balanced? How can we be more human? How can we provide resources to support leaders? Because I think one of the challenges I've encountered is the fact that actually we don't have ways of supporting people in that very tight spot. You see, in a corporate world, you have the money generally to do what you're doing. In the non-profit sector, you live from hand to mouth. And you have to show that you can keep your organization alive. And that puts a lot of pressure on you. You may have a board, but it stops with you. So that just makes us go crazy. And so now looking back and meeting people in different places, and usually I just see it. I can read their eyes. I certified as a coach, so I'm able to sense a lot of what's going on. Sometimes people are not aware, and you can even see sometimes they are greeting you, but they're absent-minded because you don't represent the money they're looking for. So it is. I think it's the best time to write, and also I feel I have the freedom. I'm not writing about any of my organizations where I work. I'm just writing the facts. And I have nothing to lose. I have to say things as they are. I'm not feeling tied by anybody. I don't need to represent a certain perspective
or any view.
Any view, no. I'm just speaking the truth as I know it, and acknowledging also maybe there are things I did that were not necessarily the best. And actually when I look at my journey, I think by the time I chose to go for a local organization, I was struggling with the same things. I was fighting for some ability to say and do the right thing. So I feel that it's a space that is much better, much safer, and I can engage with anybody and tell them what I have seen and observed and experienced. So it's a great time.
So which takes me to perhaps what you are currently doing, but maybe let me ask it broadly, that having had this benefit of this journey that you have traveled, but luckily, unlike many, you decided at some point, I must stop now and just have the time to live so that I can, be able to reflect and all of that. Some people don't even do that. They go on until their last day on earth, right? When you think about it now and you look back and you see all these people who are actually moving, talking, but they are not in existence, what do you think in the non-profit sector world we should be doing? Or maybe put differently, people like you who now know the dangers of what each and every person is doing at the moment, those who are in leadership positions, in programs and whatever, what should the role be for people like you who have left but are still have the energy to engage, but you are engaging differently?
I actually think it would be great if we did not create a disconnect between leaders who have left and current leaders. Just like in our traditional society, we did have ways of engaging our elders. We used to call them elders, and we had ways and opportunities and spaces to pick their wisdom. I think there is a need to create spaces where we can pick the wisdom of others who have gone through the same journeys we are going through, and be able to share it with them, maybe create support mechanisms, perhaps create coaching opportunities for leaders so that it is not as lonely, as hard as it is and as it was for us. If I can do anything, and that has been my position, if there's anything I can do to make somebody's life better who is in the position I was, I would honestly love to do it. Because, this is the best we can do. Why make the same mistakes? Why go through? It's easy to actually burn out. In fact, when I look back, I think I was mad to have agreed to go through. To put it roughly, it's a bit of madness to agree to go through everything. And especially for those of us who are not just in a job, but who are really trying to do something that is long-term, creating a long-term institution, thinking not just about today, but also about how will this institution continue doing what needs to be done. I mean, that's a very serious place to be in, and a very too much responsibility is placed on you. And you don't have the advantages of a lot of money from anyone. So it means you really have to struggle to get that right every day. And so the most we can do really is create opportunities to support those who are going through this and share what we can learn. So I think there are many practical things I think that we could do, including providing budgets where an ED can tap into some of these resources, even on a one-to-one basis, so that they can be normal people at the same time.
At the same time, there's a concept that I've been discussing with other development partners, which I think you are speaking to indirectly. I've been thinking about, in the government sectors or in foreign relations, you can have the Council on Foreign Relations, and whether or not we don't need something in the non-profit sector around, maybe just to use loosely, the Council of the Wise, right? Where people like yourself, Akwasis, BCs, and all of them are part of that, council or that collective, so that whoever needs to be assisted on this or that, there is somewhere where they can go, and there are processes that are put in place, mechanisms to make sure that those that have left leadership positions continue to be utilized, to be useful, but also to guide and mentor the ones who have just come up. And like you're saying, there's currently a disconnect between those that were leading and those that have just started leading. So I don't know, maybe at some point we'll see this Council of the Wise. I mean, we'll look for a better name coming up, because I also believe that if we don't do that, then, all the experience, the wisdom, once somebody leaves an organization, then they go with everything. And there's no possibilities of us benefiting from that. But maybe that's something that we can come back to at some point and see if practically it can be done. So when we last spoke, you had just started, doing your own things, consulting, but also doing the Galvanizing Africa, What has occupied Janet since 2023 to today?
I actually have continued to do. The one good thing about being at this point of your life is you can afford to make choices about the things you'd like to do. And so I did, for purposes of just being practical around my work, I had to create a company. That's why I've got a company called Galvanizing Africa. And really the idea, I mainly focus on two things, either executive leadership coaching, and I certified as a coach just after leaving my previous organization, and organization development, because I continue to be very concerned about that whole area of, or rather I've recognized that to do work at scale, you actually need serious organizations. Serious organizations rooted in Africa that are stable. And when these organizations now do the right thing, you are likely to get some of the results that we all talk about. So the idea of supporting leaders who are running organizations, it's very much at the heart of what I try to do. There are those grappling with governance issues of their institutions, building teams, building cultures that support their work in an environment where there's so much that is against the tide of where you want to go. You can't assume you're having the right teams, properly motivated in the right way. So all these are the couple of things that I engage with. But the other side of the work is I use every opportunity I get to work with funders who are genuinely interested in supporting the work in the continent in a way which allows organizations to be effective. So there are some funders who really like to make sure they are decolonizing in the way they work, or international organizations broadly. So when I have an opportunity to engage in an assignment which is looking or helping a funder improve the way they are working, I usually take it seriously because funders are extremely influential in the continent. Having money makes them influence the way other local organizations are working. So usually a lot of what I try to do is around those areas, and usually I team up sometimes with other local consortiums, or sometimes I've joined global platforms that are very much aligned to this kind of thinking. For example, I've been part of reimagining the international NGO, Ringo, which is also trying to support our NGOs in how they are decolonizing in the continent. What are the practical things you actually do differently as a board, as a team, so that you really are effective in how you're interacting with communities. So those are the things.
So of course, part of the reason I wanted to chat to you briefly is because I also wanted just to have a catch up on where you are and what you've been doing. This for me is part of documentation. Even though you have left leadership, you are still playing immense roles, and so I wouldn't want us to lose out on what you are doing, because I think we have in many ways underestimated the role of coaching when it comes to leaders. We almost assume that leaders know what they should know, and we have left out the role of coaching. And whereas when you really look into things, you realize that every leader needs to have coaches or a coach to work with them on a day-to-day basis or on particular issues. And so I'll be keen to really see how this coaching function that you have embarked on does help, and we can document it in one form or the other. Of course, when you do your writings, probably you are going to touch on that as well. But it's more than 3.5 years since you left the helm of KCDF. And just before we started shooting, I was saying that I would want us to look back now and look at some themes and see whether you, with the 3 years of benefit of having to just think and reflect back without the constraints of whether it's an organization or it's the board or whatever the case might be, you could think freely and reflect freely and be honest with yourself, and for that matter, wanted to really check whether you have different or you still have the same perspectives around certain themes. So for example, we start with, let's say, how non-profit organizations are managed in Africa. You probably had a view when you were at the helm, and you have a view today. So if we could just maybe take a look at management of non-profit organizations from the perspective of a former manager.
Maybe when I've written my chapter, I'll be in a better position than I am today. But I think we probably underestimate the way we as Africans have embraced some of the things we do. Because for a lot of us, these are jobs.
Yeah.
We actually very often don't take that ownership of this is work happening to us in the continent, to our own people. And really asking ourselves, is everything I'm doing here really relevant? Is it really supporting, the kind of empowerment, ownership that needs to happen? And I think I have just felt that we probably have too many things attached to our institutions, which are a challenge.
Yeah.
And when you go back, you'll find most of these are connected with the fact that we get money from somebody who makes certain rules for us. And that kind of begins to influence even our own systems. Many of us, I think, still have systems that are a bit cumbersome. And sometimes the bigger you are, the more you get taken up by these things, and you're not thinking really about it.
Yeah.
It's more like you need to obey the rules. You need to play the game. You need to play the game so that you get your next grant, so that you can get your everything okay.
Yeah.
But very often we are not thinking hard about how we are doing it, and some of the convictions we ourselves need to have, and understanding about ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, of course, when you get a big grant, you are happy you have a big grant, but you are actually not thinking hard about, so how can I ride on this to actually get our organization further down the road of independence?
Yeah.
So I feel we have often lost opportunities because of not quite being honest with ourselves. Being authentic, and and getting big money is what gives us a big profile. You see, it's like now that's a successful organization. Yeah, but in terms of is what we are doing really the right thing? Are we even able to have the kind of partnerships? I have actually, one of the things I've continued to realize is the issue of achieving large-scale change requires a much different approach in many cases than we are still obsessed with projects. Because this project is funded. But if you look hard, there are times when we should have had a different type of a partnership with different actors, and be less, not be so carried away by our logos and I am standing for, I represent so and so. It's like all the time you are representing this person. But not really thinking hard about what would actually result in a larger scale change. And I think sometimes we could have worked hard. It would have been more difficult, but there are certain things we could have done to make government, or to help government achieve the kind of change it needs to achieve on the ground. But instead, we have all these favorite projects which we are implementing, some of which should be in a larger scheme under the government. But because it's about us, about our survival, the work of how can we really have a large-scale change in our country system, how can we truly get government to do its work? How can we be more on the background, less visible, but actually call the government to take its responsibility for offering the kind of services we tend to offer. I think we would be less visible as institutions, but we would push the government to do its role, and probably there would be a much greater change than working in one district or one location and sending all these fantastic colored reports. You know, so I think there are partnerships which would have given us more positive change than we tend to do. So I'm still working through that, but
Yeah.
I'm particularly concerned about systemic change. And I think very often we are not engaging adequately with that.
So as you work with most of the leaders from a coaching perspective, what are some of the probably constantly coming up issues that leaders of non-profits are dealing with? Of course, funding is one of them, but I'm sure there are other deeper issues that you are picking up as you coach one person to the next.
I think just being burnout.
Yeah.
Stress,
so issues of wellness. Yeah.
The wellness bit.
Yeah.
I think that's a very big concern.
Yeah.
And just feeling like everything is pulling you in different directions, and all those things are yours as an ED to.
Yeah.
So you are kind of caught up with that.
Yeah.
I think there are also a number of cases of not having boards that really understand some of the development issues we are dealing with, and so they kind of pull you back. And I think the various institutional things which you need to address very often look like they are getting ignored because of the pressure for survival.
Yeah.
So you end up actually not really having good systems in place, or even supporting staff well-being. Yes, just like you yourself are in that state, you tend to push the same thing, your team.
Yeah.
So also
Yeah.
your teams are not quite
Right.
in very good state, and so I think those are some of the ones that seem to stand out.
Yeah.
Governance. I think those are some of those that tend to stand out quite a lot. Yeah.
You have actually covered some of the themes that I wanted to say, looking back, issues of governance, partnership, sustainability, and in many ways you have covered that. And I'm assuming that when you actually do the book now, most of the expansion is going to happen there. So I wouldn't want us to go deeper than that, so that we give you the opportunity to even expand. And so maybe let's end on just looking at what's in store for Janet for 2025. What is it that is going to occupy you? What are your aspirations for 2025? You started away from home, here in almost near the Kruger National Park. In a few days' time, is back to your usual life. So what's 2025 like for Janet?
I think the book is the big thing for me.
Yeah.
The book, if I can get the book out, or at least make significant progress, so that I'm really moving towards the very, very final stages, I would be happy. So I'm actually kind of wondering what are the things I could drop for now and give it a bit more focus. Because I think it will also give me a platform to discuss some of these things which I've observed. And engage with more leaders. If I can get that one thing out, other things are by the ways.
Okay. Sounds like you're asking us to find a way to hold you accountable to the book.
Exactly.
So let's do that outside this conversation, so that we find a mechanism so that it's come sometime next year, this time we have a solid product that we could be talking about. Janet, thank you so much. This was a catch-up conversation. I just wanted to take advantage that you are here, and we last spoke in 2023, and a lot happens in between. And just as I imagined, a lot has been happening. So thank you so much for making the time. Thank you. That was Janet Mawiyoo joining us here on the margins of the writing retreat at the Vesrural facility. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the KCDF podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.